Can I welcome everyone to this, the fourth meeting of the Public Petitions Committee in 2020. The first item on our agenda today is a declaration of interest. We have a new committee member, Tom Mason, who takes over from Brian Whittle. Can I, on behalf of the committee members and the clerks, thank Brian Whittle for all the work he's done in his time in the committee, the energy he brought to that work, and particularly, I think, his dedication and focus on our mental health inquiry, and we wish him well. And we can welcome Tom Mason and ask Tom if you have any interest to declare.
Well, thank you, Convener, and thank you for the welcome. I have to draw your attention to my register of interests, but particularly to the fact that I'm a councillor in the Aberdeen City Council.
Thank you very much for that. Can we now move to the next item on our agenda, which is a consideration of continued petitions. The first continued petition for consideration today is petition 1540 on a permanent solution for the A83 lodged by Douglas Filland, calling on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to ensure that a permanent solution for the A83 at the Rest and Be Thankful, ensuring the vital lifeline route is not closed because of landslides. Can I welcome Rhoda Grant MSP and Jackie Bailey MSP for this item? As members will be aware, last year we agreed to take evidence on this petition from the Scottish Government, and I'm pleased to welcome Michael Matheson, Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure and Connectivity, Fiona Brown, Head of Strategic Transport Planning, and Johnny Moran, Operating Company Manager, both of the Scottish Government. And can I invite the Cabinet Secretary to provide a brief opening statement before we move to questions?
Good morning, Convener, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide you with an update with regards to progress at the Rest and Be Thankful next to the A83. Convener, I'm acutely aware of the importance of the A83 trunk road to the communities and the economy of Argyll and Bute. We have continued to invest in this key route, and since 2007 we've invested some £79.2 million in the maintenance of the A83 trunk road. Since the decision at the February 2013 task force to progress with the red option measures, this government has funded £13 million on landslide mitigation measures and improvements to the local old military road diversion. These measures have been successful by helping to keep the A83 open for 43 days when it would have otherwise closed. However, at my first A83 task force meeting in November 2018 and following concerns raised by local stakeholders, I announced that this region, Argyll and Bute, would be one of the first to be reported on in the STPR2 process. I'm glad to report that we have recently reached the first major milestone of the review with publication of the draft Regional Case for Change report for Argyll and Bute. The publication of the report forms the first step in the appraisal process and sets out the evidence base that underpins the review. The next steps will see the development of a short list of interventions which will then be taken through a detailed appraisal later this year. We'll still continue to explore ways to reduce the risk of impact from landslides in the area, and I'm glad to announce today that I have given approval for the construction of the next roadside catch pit at the Rest and Be Thankful in the coming financial year, valued at £1.9 million. Once complete, the Phase 1 catch pit will provide an additional 4,600 tonnes of storage capacity to collect debris flow from the landslides, to add to the 14,600 tonnes provided with the current 4 catch pits. I've asked my officials to discuss the timing of these works with Argyll and Bute Council, as we have the option to build this pit during June and December 2020, or to delay it until the tourist season and to build between September 2020 and March 2021. We've also progressed the programme to proactively plant trees on the hillside to help reduce the risk of landslide in the area. Land purchased at the Rest and Be Thankful has been concluded, and we are working closely with Forestry and Land Scotland to reintroduce the required local provenance native vegetation on the hillside. The erection of a deer fence is programmed to commence this summer, with planting due to commence early next year. And I'm more than happy to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much for that. If I maybe start up. Now, I should, of course, welcome Donald Cameron, MSP, who's here for this item as well. As you may be aware, this petition has been running for almost 7 years, predates a lot of us who are on this committee, and yet, as of yet, a permanent solution as requested in the petition has not been provided. In that time, we understand work has been undertaken and substantial investment has been made to keep the 83 at the Reston Would Be Thankful open. However, as recently as January this year, the road was again closed due to a landslip. Would it be fair to say that the Scottish Government's response to this long-standing issue has been piecemeal in its approach?
No, because the work which was undertaken to assess what the long-term solution should be was the red option, which was taken back in 2013. The work relating to the red option was largely completed by 2014, with the exception of the tree planting. Part of that was because that was a long-term project. So that was the principal options that were assessed at that time, and the red option was seen as being the most appropriate measure to be taken forward. What has happened since then is that there have been additional mitigation measures which have been introduced, particularly the catch pits, which have been further introduced and will be further extended, as I've announced here this morning. Any wider strategic transport interventions in the Argyll and Bute area would be required to go through the STPR2 process, which is exactly what is happening just now, with the Argyll and Bute area being exhilarated, as I agreed back in 2018, would be one of the first to report, actually would be the first to report in terms of the range of options that could be introduced into Argyll and Bute for further transport interventions. But no, I wouldn't say it's been piecemeal, because the red option was the option which was agreed at the task force, and those measures were completed in 2014 by and large.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk about mitigation, but clearly that's not a permanent solution. And one of the, I mean, you may want to comment on this. You had meetings in the first half of last year to consult, and we're now sort of meandering our way through to some kind of response to that. Maybe it's just me, but it feels like unbelievably slow progress has been made round the review. And is there any scope? You have to look at this, and then they're going to look at that, and so on. Slower than the traffic on the A83, I'm sure, at sometimes. Is there any way of looking at accelerating that? It just feels as if that process that's been described in our papers doesn't match the urgency of the issues for local people, and, as has been flagged up by the Council, the consequence for the economy of the local area and the sustainability of it.
Of course, well, the wider mitigation measures will help to provide greater resilience, which is obviously one of the issues that was highlighted in the petition. And we've already saw, as a result of the mitigation measures which have been put in place, greater levels of resilience at the Reston Be Thankful. But there remain risks, which is why further mitigation measures are being undertaken. I presume you're referring to the STPR2 process in terms of the review. That's a major strategic piece of work which takes place right across the country.
Yeah, it can be major without being so slow that we're not dealing with the problems it's supposed to address. I mean, I find it astonishing that you can be doing consultations in the first half of last year and yet still be pretty vague about when the conclusions of this are going to come.
Well, the conclusions of STPR2 will be published in this parliamentary term, so it will be published by next spring, which will be for the whole of the country.
So that's it.
No, it's not that. It's not that. It's a major piece of work that it's been done in a different way from the last time it was carried out, which was in 2008, where it was done at just simply a national level. So, in recognition of some of the very regionalised issues, we have broken it down into a regional approach. So, in order to help to speed up the process for Argyll and Bute, the work that was necessary as part of that for Argyll and Bute was brought forward to be undertaken at an earlier stage. That's why the process started last year. The Case for Change report was published last week. We'll now go into the appraisal process, looking at what the intervention should then be, and then that will then be fed into the recommendations for the STPR2 process for the whole of the country. That's happening in the southwest of the country, it's happening in the borders, it's happening in the north the Highlands of Scotland as well. So it's happening at a regional level to make sure that stakeholders have an opportunity to shape that process and to feed into that process and to identify what the issues may be within each of the individual regional areas within Scotland.
Okay, thank you. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, panel. Cabinet Secretary, the STPR2 process, you said, will report back at this parliamentary term. But there have been stakeholder workshops and the task force have been going on for a number of years now. What's the feedback from locals about how the process has gone so far?
In relation to STPR2?
Just in relation to the mitigation measures and what's been happening.
Well, there'll be a variety of views. So I chaired the last task force meeting in January, where the principal focus wasn't on further mitigation measures as such. The principal focus at that meeting was actually on issues relating to the bus stop at the top of the Rest and Be Thankful. There are a variety of stakeholders on it who have different views on what they would like to see happening. Some further mitigation work, some alternative routes. So there's a variety of different views on it. I suspect for some of them there'll be a frustration to feel as though that they would like to have saw further action taken in a particular way at a certain time. But broadly at the last meeting, the focus was actually on public transport issues rather than actually being on the mitigation works on the Rest and Be Thankful. There was a full presentation given on the work that had been taken forward since the last stakeholders meeting. In terms of the STPR2 process, maybe ask Fiona Brown to give you a bit more of an insight into the engagement process that's been undertaken there and some of the issues that's starting to flush out in some of the feedback we've had to date.
Hi. Yes, so as you correctly said, we undertook workshops and stakeholder feedback sessions last year. There was also an online survey. And yes, the feedback has been largely about the resilience of the strategic road network and people quite clearly stating that they want something reliable. We are aware of the issues of depopulation around Argyll and Bute, perceptions of lack of investment due to resilience of the network. So that was coming through the stakeholder consultation. And then we also had workshops on interventions, which were around a permanent solution for the rest, but also other fixed link options for ferries, public transport reliability of the bus networks, enhancements to the rail network. So a variety of interventions coming forward, because as we're looking at the Argyll and Bute region as a whole.
It is worth keeping in mind that STPR2 is not about roads, so it's about every form of transport. So it's about ferries, public transport, aviation, roads, so it's about all aspects of transport, which is why it's a fairly substantial piece of work that has to be undertaken. The Rest and Be Thankful element of it will just be one part of that wider review work.
And the latest mitigation that you just told us about in your opening statement, the catch pit, is that when STPR2, when you finally managed to get a solution, and I think that someone else is going to ask about timescales for that, but will this mitigation measure then, if the timescales are right, will it form part of the final solution? And if it's costing, I think you said 1.9 million, is that going to be part of is that going to be fed into the final cost of the final solution, or does that stand alone? And do you have any idea of a final budget for a solution at all?
No, the mitigation work that's been undertaken and the additional catch pit that I've announced today is separate to STPR2. It's not dependent on STPR2. So if we didn't have, say for example, if we didn't have an issue with the Rest and Be Thankful, we'd still be undertaking the STPR2 process within Argyll and Bute, because we're doing it right across the whole of the country. So the mitigation works on the Rest and Be Thankful stand on their own, as opposed to it being dependent on any part of the STPR2 process.
Okay, thank you. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, panel. As somebody who visited Rest and Be Thankful in the previous committee in the last session, to see the work, the improvements to Old Miltry Road and to the barriers that were put up, You mentioned earlier about the catch pit. Do you think that's enough, or is more barriers needed to, with the condition of the hill and how unstable it is?
So there's been so the original recommendation was to pursue the option that was set out in the red option back in 2013-14. The bit that's outstanding from that is the tree planting on the hillside. However, that's a 10 to 15 year programme in terms of the benefits that you get from that. However, the land is now purchased and that piece of work will be progressed. The additional catch pits, what the geotechnical advisors are indicating is the dynamic nature of the hillside, is that over the course of the years the behaviour of the hillside has changed, which has resulted in areas where there wasn't an issue, it becoming an issue. So it's been a dynamic situation, as he would describe it, which is why further mitigation measures have been put in, which are over and above that was set out within the red option. But there is no doubt the biggest recorded landslide on that particular hillside was back in October 2018. Which and at that occasion the biggest recorded on the site, and the mitigation measures worked. They delivered what they were intended to do in diverting and also preventing it, the road closures. So there was a real benefit already identified from them. I'll come alongside the catching of the debris with the nets. So it worked. There are occasions when the mitigation measures have worked. They've done their job, as I mentioned in my opening statement. But there is greater resilience that can be provided by introducing further catch pits, which is why I've announced that there will be catch pit 1 will be introduced. What I've also asked officials to do is to look at where there are, in terms of helping to improve resilience even further, whether we should consider undertaking further catch pit work along other aspects of the road. And officials are presently reviewing that with advice from the geotechnical specialist to give us advice on if we were to introduce further catch pits, where they should actually be, and to provide us greater resilience on it. So they have delivered what they were intended to do when incidents have occurred, and that's why I want to consider where we should do more of that, and if that could provide greater resilience going forward.
Cabinet Secretary, you mentioned that the land's been purchased and the deer fence is going up and the tree planting. How soon is the tree plant going to take place? You said it was going to be a 15-year project.
Yeah, well, the tree planting is due to start, I think, in the spring of next year.
That's right.
And we're working with land and forestry teams to take that forward. Part of it is, there's been a part of the challenges. One is procuring the land. And then once the deer fence is put in, the planting can then take place. So, and I believe there are times when you would undertake that type of work as well. So, for example, the fencing is largely done during the summer months, or idea, and the planting tends to be done in the spring as well. So the planting work should start to take place in the spring of next year.
Tom Mason.
Yes, Minister. One area of improvement that was highlighted was the upgrading or improvement of the old military road, which serves as a diversion when the A83 is closed. Can you provide an update on the work that has been and how many times the military road has successfully been used as a diversion to the A83?
I think the old military roads has been used something in the region of around 19 occasions as a diversion route, and the upgrading work to that route has been complete. Enough for something further you could add to that, Johnny, but the upgrading, the resurfacing of it, etc., was all carried out. It's all. I don't know, was there any other outstanding work on the old military road?
There's nothing outstanding just now. The last significant piece of work was at the Archer side of the old military road, where it was widened by a significant amount, and that cut down the journey time under convoy from 17 minutes to 11.5 minutes, and it gave better access and egress. So there's definite improvements that we've provided to that. As mentioned by the Cabinet Secretary there, the road is surfaced to a high degree, and any time it's brought into use, it's inspected by the Police Scotland and Bear Scotland as well before it's brought into use.
Okay, and what about the forestry road? Is that used still there as an alternative as well?
Sorry.
Which forestry road are you referring to?
The one, the one beside the other side.
The one on the Brack side,
Yeah, yeah.
so on the
I think
Lochgoyle Head
that's
side,
right, yeah.
on
If
that.
my geography right.
Yeah. Has that been used previously as a
No,
diversion
that was considered in the early stages of the study back in 2012, 2013 as one of the potential diversions, but there's a number of issues identified with that. So a pro-con exercise was undertaken that decided the old military road was the better one to use.
Oh, so that's out of the picture altogether.
It hasn't been used as a diversion.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, thank
It
you.
is, it is just a forestry road.
Sure.
So in terms of it's substandard for as a trunk road.
Yeah. Okay. It is a way through though, but
Something Mike Russell had suggested,
Yes, it was. It was one of the options that was
Yeah,
considered
okay.
back in 2013.
but it's
Yeah.
not. It's
so the military road is the one that is going to be the alternative if necessary. Yeah.
That's the one which is used. Yes.
okay. Maurice Corey?
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Cabinet Secretary and ladies and gentlemen. I was a councillor on the roads and infrastructure with Argyll and Bute from 2012-16, so I know quite a lot about this. And just coming back to that point about the blue option, which was the south side of the Crow, it was taken as a decision by the council to look at that much more seriously, and obviously it was overridden by the Scottish Government at the time, but I do still think that would have been a sensible option overall, and not purely as a track to relief, actually the main road itself, to move it across to the south side of Glen Crow. Anyway, obviously all this has had an enormous impact on the area of Argyll and Bute, particularly in economics and businesses and tourism and what have you. And obviously there's the concern about the pre-planned diversion route, which obviously is the old military road, which has been deemed for health and safety reasons as an old hill climb route, which I remember well, is no longer going to be that, obviously, but obviously it's been considered to be safe enough for a relief road. But still people feel that it's a number of issues about that particular relief road. And are you able to provide, Cabinet Secretary, some reassurance for those who feel this economic impact that it's having on by this problem with the H3, that it's a priority and the Argyll and Bute area must be kept open for business? And there's a feeling there's not enough priority given to it. And I quote what the convener was saying just now, is despite what's in SPRTO and everything else, it needs to be a major issue because we're not getting anywhere at all. We're looking at a sticking plaster approach to this whole repair to the road, and there should be considerably other options looked at.
I'm just trying to be clear. Are you referring to what needs to be done on the old military road, or just in Argyll and Bute in general?
What I'm saying, Cabinet Secretary, is first of all there's a question about the old military road because he couldn't put it into operation the last time he had the landslip with all the 1,000 tonnes that came down right in the south on the Arica side of the Rest and Be Thankful. All right, so that was an issue there because the hydrology had changed. Why? Because the forestry had harvested their trees, so that created a problem. And are we ever going to solve this? Because doing what you're saying is frankly is a sticking plaster approach, and therefore the relief road that is in there is insufficient to satisfy the business people in the community of Argyll and Bute and for reliance on economic activity and obviously trying to stem the depopulation.
Yeah, no, I get. I'm just trying to understand the point. You're referring to the incident that took place at the end of January.
Well, yes, that was one. That was one. But I'm just trying to understand the specific point that you're looking for me to address. The point is the relief road, Cabinet Secretary, is insufficient to meet the demands of a closure of the main road, A83, to take the traffic, and therefore that's imposing problems for our communities.
So I understand that then. So I appreciate that is the case, which is why we are undertaking further mitigation works on the Rest and Be Thankful in order to provide greater resilience on the main road itself. So the ultimate objective here it needs to be is that we aren't relying on the relief road. It is purely that. It's only used when it is required, and it's been upgraded to try and assist in doing that as efficiently as possible. For example, the works which have been undertaken and widening it at the lower end to try and assist in speeding up the convoy system, which has been successful. So I recognise that. So the temporary measure is certainly not a long-term solution, and which is why further mitigation works are necessary in order to provide greater resilience on the main trunk route itself.
Okay, thank you.
David Torrance?
To put you on the spot here, Cabinet Secretary. You see, with all the measures that have been put in place just now and the additional measures that's coming to mitigate landslides, with the condition of the hill, do you think there can be a permanent solution for this?
Well, I think there is. We can get greater resilience in it. If I was to say to you that in the trunk road network, we won't have problems with landslides, I would not be able to give you that assurance. I'll give you an example. Just fairly recently in the A82, north of Ardloy, I was caught up in it. There was a landslip onto the road. Just north of Tyndrum, there was debris onto the road as well in October last year. It also washed away the Highland Main Line as well. All of which took place within a very, very short period of time due to intensive rainfall, which has required significant work to be undertaken in order to deal with the land slippage that took place on those occasions. Just the other week there, up in the A82 in Glencoe, we had a landslip onto an area again, but we haven't had landslips during intense weather, where debris has come onto the road, which is requiring work to be undertaken. So the advice which, if I was to say, the advice which I receive from engineers and the geotechnical specialists, and also from the meteorologists, is that we should expect more of these types of intense weather periods, and as a result, in areas of our transport network where we have not historically had problems, we may start to experience problems as a result. So part of the work we're doing with STPR2 is thinking about other measures that we can put in place to try and mitigate against some of these issues. That's not just in road, it's in rail as well. We've had very significant problems in the Highland Main Line, the line to Fort William on a number of occasions now, with landslips and also with the washaway through intense weather in a way that which we haven't had before. So we are going to have to manage these as best we can, but I can't give you that type of guarantee. We have over 2,000 miles of trunk road network. There are areas which are more vulnerable than others, and that's where we need to look at taking forward mitigations. But given the weather changes which we're experiencing, it is having an impact on our transport network. Some of you have experienced that in your own constituencies in different areas. And we have to look at trying to manage that as effectively as we can.
Okay. Can I go back to this point about timescales? Because we did get a submission from Argyll and Bute Council, and they say there's no commitment from the Scottish Government to deliver a permanent solution on timescales. The Council's understanding is that decisions on the funding of regional and national projects has not been accelerated. If a project is identified to the rest and be thankful, it will have to compete for inclusion in the project programme, which will span 10 years. And the funding decisions, it believes, are at least 2 years away. Is that right?
The decisions around funding will be part of the capital spending review, which will take place this year, which will feed into the STPR2 process.
So the SPTR will report next year, just before this place closes down. And so are they wrong in thinking that the funding has not been accelerated?
It's not that there's, well, it's not, I think they're confused if they're talking about funding being accelerated, because the process is that the STPR2 assessment process has been accelerated. STPR2 will be published as one complete review. What will then happen is that decisions will be made about where funding is prioritised to, and which projects have been taken forward over the course of STPR2.
This is a process over which you've got complete control, so it's not something that you're at the mercy of. You have control over these timescales.
Yes, in the timescales, so, but I think Argyll and Bute, in their submission to you, are wrong, or they've misunderstood the process. The STPR2
you think maybe they've misunderstood what accelerated meant?
Yeah, because the process was to assess what was required within Argyll and Bute.
So you've accelerated the assessment, but not the funding that would deliver the change. Is that
no,
right?
because STPR2 was always due to be published in this parliamentary session. Nothing has changed in that time frame.
So nothing has changed in terms of accelerating the funding that would make a difference to the 83.
Well, we haven't completed the assessment yet. So once STPR2 has been complete, then the funding decisions are made.
Okay. I'm going to invite some of our guests if they want to have a question. And the first person indicates Jackie Bailey.
Thank you very much, Convener. And I welcome the fact that the Cabinet Secretary got stuck on the A82 as well, because he'll know I've been pursuing investment in both the A82 and the A83, because they're both in my constituency.
Get stuck, I get passed.
Oh, you got past. But nevertheless, I was at the task force meeting in June 2019 where we considered the STPR2 and I think it would be fair to say that we heard from local people about the need for a permanent solution, the majority of whom favoured a completely different trunk route being established. So I'm keen to kind of pursue with you and your officials, is it mitigation on the existing route that is likely to be the permanent solution because you've invested so much money in that already? Or are you quite open to developing a completely new trunk route?
No, the STPR2 process will look at all options, so including other options around alternative routes into Argyll and Bute. So, it's not. If it helps, we are not. STPR2 will not rule out looking at other options as routes into Argyll and Bute, because of the mitigation work we're undertaking in the 83 at the Rest and Be Thankful. The mitigation work in the 83 and the Rest and Be Thankful stands on its own 2 feet. It is a piece of work which has been undertaken in its own right. It's part of the STPR2 process, and as it goes through the appraisal process, if it identifies that we should be looking at other options for Argyll and Bute, then that process will stand on its own 2 feet as well. So if it helps to give you an assurance that the mitigation work does not mean that we do not then look at other options for Argyll and Bute.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Can I pursue something that the convener started off on, and that's lead-in times for all of this? Because if you're stuck, as we often are at the Rest and Be Thankful and have to pursue other routes, you want to know when this is going to end. So whatever option you land on, when is it likely to be realised? Because I appreciate the timescale you've outlined, but I'm keen to understand if you approve a particular course of action, when will that happen? Will you prioritise funding for these type of projects given the obvious need?
So we are still implementing provisions in STPR1, which was introduced in 2008. So so that's still been taken forward. So it's a largely 10-year programme of work. However, some of the projects can take longer than 10 years for delivery, just because of construction. So if they, say for example, STPR2 for Argyll and Bute identified an alternative trunk road route to the existing route at the Rest and Be Thankful, not just because of the challenges we've had in the Rest and Be Thankful, but actually for wider economic, population issues, etc. In Argyll and Bute, even a fixed link, etc. At the Cowal Peninsula, which is being proposed. These would take in a very extended period of time to be introduced. So you can be taken for a roads project, can be 8, 10, 12 years of that scale to actually go from the assessment process, the technical phase of it, and then to the actual execution in the delivery of it in itself. If you look at any major trunk road project of that type of scale, which is why even in accepting that something else should be undertaken, the 83 at the Rest and Be Thankful remains critical in terms of maintaining access to Argyll and Bute, which is why I've asked for further consideration to be given to where there are additional mitigation measures that we can put in over and above what has been planned to date. For example, further catch pits, because they have been successful to date where they've been installed. And because even in agreeing some alternative route, in addition to that, is that we are still going to be dependent upon it for an extended period of time.
Finally, convener, if I may, can I just push you slightly on the funding prioritisation, because I absolutely accept everything you say about major projects and their delivery times, but the economic impact and the rate of depopulation of Argyll and Bute is worrying, and I am therefore concerned that 10 years seems like quite a long time frame for a permanent solution to be found.
So I recognise that, but what will happen is that in looking at identifying which projects progress at different rates will be looked at a national level. So I suspect you would say that if I was to say to you, is it the A82 that should be a priority, or is it the A83? You would say it's both.
It's both.
If I go to the southwest of Scotland and I say to them, is it the A77 or the A75? They will say it's both. So we have to look at all of these different competing issues. What will happen in terms of accelerating the process is that the identified projects for Argyll and Bute will be the first that will come to me for consideration for inclusion within STPR2. But it will have to be looked at against all of the other competing demands and all of the other risks that have to be taken into account.
Thank you very much.
Can I just clarify, will the SPTR2, which will be announced ahead of the election, it will identify what is going to be done, but it will not identify timescales.
It will identify the projects that are going to be taken forward in those respected areas, yes.
So it will be kind of like a wish list in itself of the good things, but it won't actually be identifying timescales.
No, it's
so
not a wish
presumably
list.
You come back.
No. So the wish list is a process before it, if you like. So I'll ask Fiona maybe to say a bit more on that. What happens is that the next phase of it will bring through all of the different types of interventions. And then what happens is that we then consult on all of those interventions. And what we then do as part of that appraisal work is then get that down to a short list of projects which are realistic in being taken forward to meet the purpose for which they're intended. And that's what will be contained within STPR2. So it's not, these are projects that we are saying that we'll be looking to take forward. It's not a wish list.
Okay,
in that sense.
it's at the, so it's kind of like the core work you're going to do over the next
It
period,
is,
then.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Forgive my ignorance. Rhoda Grant?
Can I just push you a little more on that issue about SPTR2? You've said the Rest and Be Thankful has priority within the Argyll local SPTR2 plan. Where will the Argyll plan sit within the national SPTR2? So it may be project number 1 within Argyll, but it could be project number 8 within the whole of Scotland.
Well, I can't tell you that until the process has been complete and we have all of the different competing interests and all of the different issues highlighted as part of it. We'll then have to assess which of the projects are prioritised and on what basis they're prioritised as well. So I can't tell you that it may be number 1 in Argyll and Bute and it will be number 1 in STPR2 because it will have to look at all of the various interventions that are highlighted in Argyll and Bute and right across the country.
Okay, so there is no real guarantees. I suppose
it's not. There's no any guarantee. I'm just saying to you, no, it's not. I'm not saying that it's not a guarantee. I'm just saying that I can't tell you that until the process has been undertaken and we've completed what all the various options are across the country. At which point, as I say, for example, I'm sure people would say to me, the A82 and a bypass at Fort William is a priority, or the work that needs to be undertaken, would you call it, the A82 between Tarbert and Ardlui is a priority. These are all priorities, but what we have to then do is once we've carried out the process and we have all of those different priorities, is then make an assessment on which of them are progressed earlier in the programme than others.
I'm just really trying to get some information for the petitioner. This petition's probably one of the longest running petitions in the Parliament, and we're, from the evidence this morning, we are no further forward, and I can just imagine not only the petitioner's frustration but the frustration of everyone that uses that road regularly.
I wouldn't accept that, because one of the things that the petition was looking for was for greater resilience on A83. Rest and Be Thankful, and a significant amount of work's been undertaken to deliver that. What it hasn't given them is the issue of the permanent solution that they believe is the best option. But the red route, the red option has delivered greater resilience on the route.
Okay. Just on that then, can you tell me which alternative routes are being seriously considered and appraised under SPTR2?
Well, that's the case for change that went out last week. Sets out it's agreed that there is a case for further change in a range of different areas in Argyll and Bute. I'll ask Fiona to mention a bit more what will happen in the appraisal process, is that will then start to look at what those actual options are, and then there'll be a public consultation on what those options are in order to get it down to the final shortlist. Do you want to maybe explain a bit more about that?
Yep, the process we're at the moment is sifting the long list of options to a manageable list of options that we'll appraise. We're looking to publish that in May, what those shortlists will be, and that will include the options for Argyll and Bute. We could share the long list with the committee if that would be helpful, but we're at the process across the country. We've got thousands of interventions that have been generated, and we're in the process of getting that down to the kind of hundreds level, which we'll publish in May, and that will be sifted against the objectives that we've published in the Case for Change reports. That very much feeds on from the National Transport Strategy, our sustainable investment hierarchy, the objectives we want to see as a country, what's came through the engagement, and what is the strategic transport investment. So it's that narrowing down of the thousands to the hundreds, and we imagine for Argyll and Bute we might be at the kind of region of 20 plus interventions. That's what's been similar at other regions. And yeah, that's what we'll be looking to publish in May, and then we actually appraise those options as the Cabinet Secretary's outlined to determine which ones are going to deliver us the best outcomes.
Okay. Can I just ask one final
briefly,
bit?
yeah.
The tree planting, when do you expect that to make a material difference?
Well, I'm not a forester, so what do you call? I was going to study forestry actually, but I chose not to, believe it or not. But I what do you call? Bit of useless information for you, convener. But what do you call? It is a long-term project. Is the benefits I am told that you get tend to be in this 10-12 year period when they start to take real root and hold the ground much more effectively. So. It does tend to be a long-term project.
So
but
this is a very long-term project.
It's a long-term project to give greater stability to the hillside as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody wants to study forestry goes up my estimations, so don't worry about it.
Pleased to hear that.
Donald Cameron.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry I was late arriving. I'm glad to hear that you're looking at the kind of totality of travel options into Argyll and Bute, because one of the issues that I come across is that the extreme weather that closes the Rest and Be Thankful also can have a knock-on effect to ferries, for instance, down to Rothesay or Dunoon. And I think it's hugely important to consider everything because people are quite literally cut off. I suppose it's just to echo the frustration that I hear talking to people. I'm going to Dunoon tomorrow, and I know that one of the things I will be asked is when will we see a permanent solution? And it strikes me from what we've heard that just appears to be as remote as ever. Can you give any kind of reassurance that a permanent solution will happen?
In terms of an alternative route, or in relation to the mitigation on the Rest and Be Thankful?
Any permanent solution.
Well, the STPR process is a process for flushing that out in greater detail and to identify what that, if there is if it identifies the need for a permanent solution, what that permanent solution should be as well. But to do that in the way in which you've just outlined yourself, that is holistic and looking at all of the issues within Argyll and Bute around all modes to try and provide greater transport connectivity within the region as a whole. But the STPR2, because what I can say to people in Dunoon is that the the Strategic Transport Project Review process is a very thorough, detailed process that is evidence-based and is a process which is open to the community to engage in order to shape what the findings are and the recommendations are for the Argyll and Bute area. So I give them an assurance that it's a very open, established process that should identify any permanent solution that's necessary and what that permanent solution should actually be.
Okay, thank you. And just finally, one thing that people feel is that they see big infrastructure projects in central Scotland, for instance, the Queensferry Crossing or the dualling of the A9 in the north, and they, I think, feel with some justification that perhaps smaller but less significant projects like the A83 or the A82 get less sort of focus from the government. How would you respond to that?
I don't accept that. I understand it though, because I hear it in most parts of the country. So if I go to the northeast, they will say there's not enough infrastructure spent here. If I go to, for example, if I discuss it with the local authorities in the Edinburgh area, they will say there's a need for greater infrastructure investment in roads as well. Every part of the country I go to, there is a perception that other parts of the country are getting more infrastructure investment than others. What we have to do is to make sure that when we are undertaking major infrastructure projects, that we do so in an evidence-based way, and that we target resources to deliver the best possible outcomes for the investment which we are making. But I appreciate and I recognise those frustrations, but I wouldn't say that there's one area that's favoured more than any other. There are challenges right across the country that I receive on a regular basis from local elected members in this very place, almost on a weekly basis, about the need for further investment in a constituency in a region of the country. And we try to use STPR process as a means by which we can identify what are the issues, the challenges, and how can we most effectively address those, and to do so in an open and fair and transparent way.
I'm conscious of time, but I've got two very brief questions finally. I'll take Maurice Corrie and then the Deputy Convener.
One for Fiona Brown, if I may ask. In your review, obviously, on the whole process of what the options are, can I ask how strong an option would be a new road up the middle of Glencroe, and secondly, a tunnel through the shoulder?
So they were...
That's been discussed since 2013.
Yes. Yeah. So at the moment, in the kind of long list of interventions, there have been interventions to improve the 83 alongside its existing alignment, so essentially within the Glen itself.
Right. That is a strong opportunity.
I can't see whether it's strong at the moment, but as an option. There's options to the north of the Glen as well, and then options to the south, crossing across the Cow as well.
Okay, thank you.
Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Just to end on a slightly different note, we have had feedback from the council that the digital connectivity in the area is very poor. So it impedes access to the landslides when they happen, and it also impedes members of the public getting access to traffic reports. What plans are there to upgrade the digital connectivity in the area?
Well, Argyll and Bute have already benefited from the DSSB programme, which has improved digital connectivity in Argyll and Bute by a significant way, but there's still much more to do, which is why the R100 programme has been taken forward. Argyll and Bute is within the northern lot of the R100 programme. That's subject to a challenge now from one of the other bidders. And is clearly going through the process, so I'm limited in what I can say about that. But the R100 programme, the commitment within it is that if people don't have full access to fibre broadband to premises by the end of 2021, then they're entitled to a voucher scheme to help to support them in getting something specific to their premises, as was set out recently in Parliament. So we're making progress. There's still more to be done. And the R100 programme should help to close down that gap very significantly in the years ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we've come to the end of our questions. What we do now need to conclude as a committee where we go with this. I think we've heard quite a lot today. I think we might have an opportunity to reflect on what we've heard, and perhaps for petitioners and others to respond to that as well before we make a final decision.
Yep.
That'd be agreed. So in that case, we would be agreeing to reflect on the evidence we've heard at a future meeting. And can I thank the Cabinet Secretary and his colleagues very much for their attendance today, and I'm going to suspend briefly to allow the witnesses to leave.